On a recent video where I was clearing the poison oak in this area, Dan from the YouTube channel DLW Oregon said he kept focusing on the dead branches in the background. Dan has spent a lot of time out in the woods with his pole saw pruning up trees like that, pruning those dead branches off. Those kind of branches are what they call ladder fuels. If you have a wildfire that's creeping along the ground, they can hit those branches, which can transport the fire up into the crowns of the trees. Then instead of having a fire that might just creep along the ground and clean things up, it goes up into the trees and kills the trees. And it's not just the dead branches, live ones can do that too. As he was watching that video, he said his OCD was kicking in and he was really wanting to prune those up. I could just picture him sitting in his chair watching a video, compulsively going like this, like he was running his pole saw trimming. A little bit of armchair pruning there. They got the best of him, and he told me he would let me borrow his battery-powered pole saw to prune those up. Well, I already have a pole saw. I have this gas-powered one. I have used this a lot, not recently, but in the past. There are a lot of things I like about it, except it is a little bit heavy for overhead use. If you're using this all day, it gets pretty tiring. I thought it'd be interesting to try the battery one to see if it performs as well as this, because it is lighter and it might make the job a whole lot easier of pruning trees up. One of the things that's really good about this pole saw is it has the ability to extend. With that, I can reach up really high and take care of something like these branches that broke off during the snowstorm. They partly broke off. This works very well when I need the length, but when I don't need the length, it makes for a heavy tool. What I can do is take the saw attachment off of that, put it on my FS 131, which makes for a lighter tool that is pretty comparable in weight to the battery-powered one. Battery-powered one's a little bit longer if I line up the rear handles. A lot of this property, I've pruned up the trees, removed the fuel ladder. This is an area where I was planning on leaving the low branches, the brush. This is a transition where we go from the cleared out area to the more thick area. In there is the riparian zone where the creek is, and keeping it closed in like this provides cover for wildlife. It keeps it shaded along the creek. Just makes it a nice little area in there. A little more of a fire hazard to leave it that way, but on the scheme of the whole property, this is a very small percentage of it. But just to make Dan happy, we'll take care of some of these dead limbs. I don't care about having those there, and it'll look better without those anyway. We'll start with the gas-powered one. These are, of course, small limbs, easy to cut. Most of the larger limbs on these trees are up in the tops. Most of the bigger trees have already self-pruned down below. But mostly what I want to test here is the lightness or heaviness, the weight, I guess that's the proper word, the weight, the maneuverability, the acceleration, things like that. Because in a lot of cases here, pruning would be doing a whole bunch of small branches or limbs. I think of limbs as being smaller than branches. English is tough. Let's try the battery one. The battery powered one feels like it may be a little bit lighter and maybe a little bit more well balanced. A little bit more well balanced. That's not good English. But that might not be, speaking of not good English, that might not be a fair comparison because this is not really a pole saw. It's more of a weed whacker with a pole saw attachment on it. But the gas saw is a lot more responsive. When you pull the trigger, it just goes. There's a delay with this one. You pull the trigger, it does nothing, then it goes, and it winds up fairly slowly compared to the gas one. With the gas one, I can just hit the trigger on each limb and zip it right off. With the battery powered, I found it was better just to hold the trigger and keep it held. Once I got it going, I didn't notice any huge difference in power. Those were small branches. Let's try it on bigger wood. Now battery, I pull the trigger now. That's not what that was supposed to do. Looks like I might not have had this clicked in right. Try that again. Even with that clicked in, it has a little bit of twist play in here. So you have to crank this down really tight to stop that. I'm going to do another cut or two with the gas one just to confirm. And no, I'm not cutting into the dirt. This is a thick layer of duff on top of the remains of an old rotten stump. This cuts a lot smoother than the other one, but that may be the differences in the chains. That's a problem with a lot of chainsaw comparison videos. A lot of times there are too many different variables. The battery powered is a borrowed tool. You have two different people maintaining the chains. I've done a lot of work on my chain over the years. My experience with these saws is the chains can last a long time because you don't have to sharpen them very often because most of the time you're up in the trees, not working on the ground. So the question is it okay to mess with another man's chain? I don't know, because I don't know if you've noticed, I can be a little bit of a raker knocker downer. I like good aggressive chains. That chain was bogging the engine a little bit, whereas the chain on the electric one seemed like the engine was not having any problem spinning the chain. I'm thinking more work on the Husky chain could maybe get it to compare to this one. I didn't keep track of seconds on one saw versus seconds on the other. I'm mostly looking for user experience. Which one do I like better? For performance and the way it cuts, I like the gas one. With the battery powered, I like that it's a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit more balanced, but that's a pole saw versus a weed whacker, one chain versus another. So what's the point of this? Maybe the point is it's pointless. Just not really fair comparisons. But I have an idea. I mowed all the poison oak down in this spot with the hedge trimmer attachment. Well, when I got over here to where all these white oak suckers are, that hedge trimmer attachment did not like these, which is what the local Stihl dealer told me would be the case. Whenever I've asked him about the idea of a blade attachment to get rid of all these sprouts, he never seemed too excited about the blade idea for several reasons. He suggested taking the chainsaw off the pole saw, putting it on the 131, turn it sideways. Actually, I don't know if he suggested turning it sideways. I just assume that's the way it would be done. Keep that out of the dirt. Talking about fixing up chains. Then use this on the material that's too big for the hedge trimmer. It's not something where I'm going to say it just slices through those like butter. But these are white oak sprouts. Normally I would cut these with a chainsaw. And even then, they're not easy to deal with. It's a little bit of a struggle for this, but they're white oak sprouts, and that's just the way they are. Maybe a blade would do better, but this is better than using a chainsaw. It works. Let's try the electric. Oh yeah, by chainsaw I mean a regular chainsaw, not a chainsaw on a pole saw. I think this one is more smooth, does a better job on this. But I'm going to try again with the gas one just to confirm that. This one is not as smooth on this. It bounces around more, but what I noticed when I got to this biggest one where it's stiff, it cut through this like butter. But with the smaller material, it bounces around a lot. And one of the reasons might be this has a more aggressive chain. When it hits these small pieces, it grabs them and whips them around, whereas the other one has more finesse. This could be a problem with my more aggressive chain. And that's one of the reasons why I say I don't know that I want to mess with another man's chain. I might fix that chain up in a way that suits most of what I'm doing. Most of what I've ever done with this pole saw is I trim off limbs that are attached right there at the tree. The tree's holding them steady, and I can get away with a more aggressive chain. When you have all this loose whippy stuff, that more aggressive chain could be a problem. So I might set up that chain for working in one condition, then he might get it back, and it's all wrong for what he does. This is why I don't listen to a lot of opinions about chainsaws. A lot of guys speak in absolutes when it comes to chainsaws. They have one experience with a certain something, and they speak like that's the way it's going to be for everybody. Reminds me of the saying, horses for courses. You want the right horse for the right course. If you have a long endurance track, you want a horse with good endurance instead of one that's going to take off in a full sprint. If you're doing a short course, you want a horse that's going to take off in a full sprint and get to the end as fast as it can. Same with tools, same with a lot of things in life. You want the right tool for the right job. And what I'm finding with both of these machines is they are the right tool for the right job. Thanks a lot, Mr. Obvious. How long were you working at this today to come up with that assessment? One of the things Dan mentioned, as we get into the height of wildfire season here, the Department of Forestry is going to ban gas-powered chainsaws or restrict them. It depends on who you are, if you're commercial or just a homeowner, the public. We're going to get to a time of the year where most people can't run gas-powered equipment. If you had a piece of property that you were cleaning up, during that time, the battery power would be good. And as he said, that's a good time to be pruning up your trees. I've noticed running a chainsaw, I get more sparks from the chain than I do from the engine. So I'm still not sure why they are allowing battery powered equipment during the height of fire season. But this would be a good time to do that because you're working up in the tree. So if your chain makes a spark, it's up there where you're not likely to spark a wildfire like you would on the ground in the duff layer. So in this part of the world, battery power can really, well, it's the only thing you can use during a certain part of the year. That's the way it is here, but in most of the world, that's not even a thing, which goes back to the right tool for the right person and the right job. What's the real takeaway here? Maybe it's since my mill has been down because I'm still waiting for the new belt. I've had more time on my hands lately. Have you been able to tell that from the last few videos?